This season of Tom Ray's Art Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Now, like this show and want to make your own podcast of your own? Well then, let me tell you about Anchor. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Now you can even add songs directly from Spotify to your episodes. The possibilities are endless for what you can create. Whether it's music analysis for your show or your radio show or something that the world's never heard before. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I've been using Anchor for the past couple of years and I'm really happy with it. So I thought I would tell you about it too. So go to anchor.fm to get started. Hi, and welcome to another Tom Ray's Art Podcast. I'm Tom. On today's show, I talk with an artist who is in Florida. He does fantasy and horror art. He also was inspired originally by animation and talks about that, talks about how he started getting interested in the way animation moves, the way the figure is drawn, the way it forms, all that kind of stuff, you know, and how he got into fantasy art and actually the human figure, the human drawing, the concept of monsters, and then recently has been doing the comic circuit with his book, Monsters and Madonnas, which is a collection of his work, drawings, stories, and things like that. A great conversation. It was really nice to meet the guy. We actually had to reschedule a few times because he's been doing the comic circuit. So I was really happy that we got the chance to get together and talk today. So here is my interview with Chris Kanitas, starting right now. First of all, where am I talking to you from? Where are you located in the world?
So I'm in Orlando, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. Where are you at?
I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm up in the Midwest here.
Yeah. No, yeah. I'm in Orlando, Florida, right in the heart of where the Walt Disney World is and all that good stuff.
I've been there a few times. Yeah, over the years.
Yeah.
So how long have you lived there?
So I'm from Toronto, Canada. I was born in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, okay.
I moved down here when I was in my teens. So I've been down here, a couple decades now. But I travel around for my work and stuff. So I go to California, I go back to Canada, believe it or not. So, and I hit a lot of the con circuits and stuff. So, that's when I'm, but my main hub is here. My studio's here. So,
yeah. What made you go all the way from way up in Canada? I say up as if it's like in the air.
Yeah.
North, way up north down to way down south like that.
Oh man, my parents were gypsies.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm looking at you this way. I know it's confusing.
Right.
But yeah, my parents were gypsies and travelers. So my dad was an entrepreneur and he moved around a lot. And so, we kind of followed. It was just the three of us. So I was an only child.
Okay.
But he dealt with a lot of the creation, the design, the construction of stuff. And he worked for the companies. He came to Florida in particular because of people that he knew in the restaurant business, and then so they pursued that, and he worked in a lot of research and development for them, and
okay.
For companies to design stuff like the interior of the restaurants and stuff. My dad was creative and stuff, so my father was sort of in the arts in a different field. He was a chef as well and all that stuff. So, but yeah, so we moved down because of my parents really, and my parents moved to California, and then they moved back. I was almost at a different school. Probably like, I don't know, every 3 years I was at a different school. So, So
I've met other people that have told me that type of stuff. And it's like, I mean, my parents still live where I grew up. Like it's so interesting to hear of people. I would have no idea what that's like. I know what it's like going to a new school because you've gotten older, but I've never had the experience of like uplifting your life and going directly to like a place where nobody knows you and all that kind of stuff. So that was,
It's difficult because you have no foundation initially, right? Because you make friends and then you move and then it's kind of like, so it's tricky. But I think that, I lock myself in my room with books and instruments of filmmaking, animation, and art. And so I sort of focused on that. And I mean, you kind of, stay drunk on creativity at that point, so that the reality of moving around doesn't destroy you. Or get to you. You kind of, your friend ends up being your art or whatever it is that you're interested in, whatever turns on a part of your brain, I think.
Yeah.
As especially because I was a lonely child, I didn't have brothers and sisters on top of it, so we're moving around quite a bit.
Yeah. When you started doing artwork, like what was your first inspiration for doing it? Like what kind of things were you drawing when you first started out?
So for art in general, I was there's an early memory I have. It's hazy and it's indistinct. It's so far back in time, I don't know if I can remember everything. But all I know is it was animation, traditional animation, I think.
Okay.
Like classical animation. Some people it's math, it's science, it's music. Some people it's nothing at all, which is unfortunate. But because everybody should have sort of something latent that's activated and that turns on a part of your brain. But it definitely was traditional animation. Mm-hmm. I couldn't. It was like a magic trick, a moment of astonishment, where every thought sort of pulls from your face, bam, leaving nothing more than empty space. You know what I mean? It's like you see something that's like, I couldn't understand how they could get drawings to move and act and put on a performance. And so, it's much more than just draftsmanship. And as a kid, I was turned on by classical animation, Disney stuff. It was ahead of my time, and then Don Bluth was a filmmaker that had made some movies in the 80s, but I saw them later on, obviously, like The Secret of Nim, and he had video games called Dragon's Lair.
I love that game. Things, yeah.
Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm very familiar. Yeah. I also have an interest in animation type background, so.
No, animation is I think it's the medium of this century. I think right now, unfortunately, it's kind of, art in general is, I just couldn't understand it. For traditional animation, the foundation is classicism. So when you get into the field, your figure drawing is prime. So in the field of arts, comics, fantasy, sort of sci-fi stuff, which is kind of what I deal with, there's 2 points of view. There's 2 points of view towards art, if not more. But before I go any further, let me just say I don't think one is right or wrong. I teach. I've taught figure drawing and animal drawing for years as well, so this is what I kind of tell students and stuff. Yeah. So there's, I don't think one of these theory or one of these ideas is wrong or right in the term. They each have their use and their value, but one is either that art's like an imitation of nature, and the other one is art's based on a concept of the ideal, meaning that you're mastering by learning from drawing from models. Because in my field, you want to draw from your imagination towards a conceptualized norm. You do that in animation too. The drawing that you do from a conceptualized norm, it's research that helps you to better understand sort of human form and movements and stuff. And so, unlike being an illustrator where you just copy the model, that has little value for you. You kind of rarely do you work from a model except in training situations. And when I was a kid, and there was classical animation, you could see, you could see these characters giving performances. You knew that they were taking things and taking things in and putting things out. So knowing what to leave in, what to put out was essential. Making a simple statement it can be deceptively, difficult. Like it looks like it's deceptively simple. Right. And the ability to draw from your imagination is a prime requisite in order to create believable attitudes and movements and bringing characters to life, which is sort of acting and performance. So you want to get past the hand-eye coordination, right? Like the pencil and the paintbrush and all the stuff is kind of an extension of you, so you can give a performance. So you can create not something that's realistic, but something that's believable. Right. Well, and not even to mention like the when you actually do get into it and you see the squash and stretch and all that kind of stuff, there are drawings that you don't even notice that are in between that you don't see and you don't realize actually accent that movement to that point. Like if you actually look at some of the squash and stretch animations, they're ridiculous looking, but they make it work. They make it better, Yeah, they make it better. And that's the thing. Injecting it with realism, it's actually more believable, believe it or not, than if you had those. So like, rotoscoping. Right. Rotoscoping is a technique where it's like tracing. Well, when you trace something, you're a slave to it. And it's actually more stiff and has less life. I don't know what it is. It has to do with photographic distortion, probably. It has to do with a lot of things that you sort of, the Renaissance artists didn't have to deal with photographic distortion because they were trying to train themselves from live models and stuff. In fact, they would use them a lot of times. Right. But that's sort of a different, but knowing what to leave in and put out is similar to what you're saying, because those in-betweens, when you sort of push them a little bit more, it actually makes it more believable. It makes it more realistic. I don't know why, but it's just probably the optics. It's like in illustration. If you look back here, this is high contrast.
Yeah.
This stuff pops. Your eye is drawn to the area of highest contrast in an illustration. So what you want to do is, in order to communicate, you want there's a strong focus in it, but you want to use 4 values: 1 light, 1 dark, 1 medium, 1 highlight. That's high contrast, and that's kind of what we see in natural lighting. And but that knowledge has to be applicable to what you're doing. So you have to know that, right? Like knowing to leave that in or to put that in. You don't want to go 5 values because you might muddy it up. You want to go 3 values and might make it flat. That's training that requires, that's beyond dexterity. That's knowledge that's applicable that you might discover. It's not something I made up. The Renaissance artists use it in the work. So that's a similar thing to what you're saying as far as squash and stretch and those, because those were techniques that they realized, hey, the body does sort of squash and it does sort of maintain that volume. If you were just to trace it, it's not quite as believable as if you push it a little bit farther, though. So when things are squashing and stretching, you kind of, the body goes down and then up in the movement and stuff like that. You need to know to go further down a bit and then because it pushes, but it looks ridiculous on one frame.
Right.
But it's beautiful and fluid in the context of the rest.
Yeah.
So, that's it's not logical. It's kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah. Well, and so during this, you were interested in this animation, but you're doing mostly illustration right now. So did you ever do animation? Did you ever try getting into animation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. I started off with storyboard and traditional animation stuff, and that was my foundation, and that foundation was based in a lot of at the time when I was really hitting it, which is like 5-6 hours a day. I was training myself through gesture. Which is there's about 10 axioms that you have to get in your work in order for things to sort of, gel. And those 10 axioms are equivalent to right hand, left hand playing, like, hand independence, like you would on a piano or something. It's the same thing when you have axioms. The gesture, volume, indirect lighting, and those things are sort of things that need to be injected in the work. But when I started off, I started off in animation, and I started off studying gesture, which is the movement and the attitude of the figure. And it's a lot of quick sketching. People refer to it as quick sketching, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, because the primary difference between like a quick sketch and gesture is that quick sketch sort of uses some of those, but gesture is you're trying to get the attitude, the body language. It's the most important element in a drawing, because no matter how well something is rendered, without the feeling of individuality that we kind of have, like as people, that we experience in looking at real life, the drawing is nothing more than an academic exercise. So you want to get past long before you can see a person's face, just like we recognize them by all those sort of elements. You ever see somebody walking in the distance and you know who it is because it's a friend of yours?
Right. And
you can tell from behind because just how they sort of, his body, how he dresses, how he walks, how he holds his head, or how she holds her head. It's just like, that that's your friend, your buddy. You can pick him out in a crowd. That's sort of gesture in a way. So you have to train yourself not to learn you're not only learning to draw, but to see. So, you practice drawing things from memory. You don't have the luxury of models. I do animals and stuff, and when you're training with animals, you don't have the luxury of studying animals only, right? Like, because they're not sitting still for you.
No,
they're always moving around and stuff. So you don't have the luxury of models holding still. So sketching from life and all that, practice looking at your subject and then drawing it from memory.
Well, what kind of stuff were you drawing during this time? Like, what was the style that you were doing when you were doing these gesture studies?
So gesture was, so when I was training myself as to get into animation, that was just that. I literally was doing figure classes and going to classes and sketching and taking sketchbooks and practicing.
In high school?
This is high school. This is like college, getting into college, trying to develop my skills. Because I don't think I was turned on by all this stuff at a young age, but I probably didn't take it serious until about 17 or 18, where I started to really, say, okay, this is something that I'm going to, when you become a man struggling for existence and you no longer have the time to pursue everything that you love, you decide to pick one thing, and hopefully you can earn a bit of, somebody's going to dish out the quid for it. You know what I mean? So you want to get to that point. So for me, I just decided that it's something I could do, and I wanted to do it. Music was another thing. Playing the piano were two. So those were two disciplines. The thing is, talent's overrated.
Okay.
Discipline is where it's at, really, for a lot of this stuff, because I've seen a lot of people with talent not really have the discipline to pursue it. And listen, there's other factors weighing into it as far as, earning a living and stuff like that. So, but I don't know why I was so driven. I think I just loved it so much. I think it just turned on a part of my brain. And like I said, the other option is war, disease, hunger, privation, Facebook, social media, or I could be in parallel universe,
Okay.
staying drunk in a parallel universe where the laws of nature differ, where there's magical fantasy and all this other stuff. So I'd rather work my ass off, practicing, looking at the subject and drawing it from memory, and instead of, and having time to take a sketchbook with me to go wherever on a bus, watching television, in the shopping mall, those are, you draw with your mind, not with your hand. Mm-hmm. And I try to tell people that you're drawing with your mind, not with your hand, that, with practice, you're going to be amazed at what you can do and all those kinds of things. But you have to do the same series of steps over and over again. That's like, that's what practice is. You just have to be mad about it. Mm-hmm. You've got to be a little bit crazy, you have to have a mania for doing things. Yeah. And, I have a mania for shapes. I have a mania for light and shadow. You'd have a mania for the universe of designs. Like, these are things that just sort of, I don't know why, there's patterns that probably, we have these weird eccentricities and wonky thought processes, and they're interesting to us a lot of times. And so, I think that's what it was for me. And so I wanted to get into animation, and I knew to get into animation that you had to be a master of the figure, basically. Yeah. And drawing the figure from your imaginative faculties and stuff like that. And that was the basis of that art form, where, Raphael, Da Vinci, Pontormo, those great draftsmen of the past, that they had these, they spent years mastering, and in the case of illustrations, they have these planned stages towards the creation of their paintings, right? Like, you have the sort of sculpturals and murals and all this stuff, but they had pragmatic steps in representing the ideas, and the classic approach of constructing forms in an effort to sort of create an ideal, perfect form, along with a desire for clarity, for transition, for ease of understanding. Mm-hmm. Those are the same requirements that you'd use for good animation. So when you get into animation, it's no different. So did you end up doing animation, or did you end up pursuing it? Or, because, like I said, I know that you're doing illustration now, but I'm curious if you ever ended up doing it. Yeah, so I ended up pursuing animation temporarily. I've worked for a couple of the big guys here and there. I've done cover stuff for people. Oh, okay. For the big companies as well. My background's like, I've done it across the board for the big guys. Okay. But for the most part, I found that, like, I just, there's a time period too where you kind of wanted to break off and kind of do your own thing. I mean, right. I'm pushing, what I was going to talk about later on is I have something called Monsters and Madonnas and my own stuff that I'm pushing. I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter for it and all that stuff. But yeah, initially though, it's all the same skill set that you need to, you have to develop the same skill set to get into the field, so it doesn't matter whether you're doing it independently or whatever. If you want to have sort of a level, I think, of excellence, like if you want to raise the bar there on that, these are the steps that you would go into. So I knew that then, because the guys that I loved, their basis was in classical figure drawing, and so that's what you had to, that's what they were teaching drawing for animation. That's what they were doing. And so, it's practice in the animation industry, or it was at the time. Yeah. Right now, I will say that the traditional animation industry kind of doesn't exist. Right. Well, there's so many, especially with the abilities to do them on your own at home, remotely, to actually produce and, put out work. There is a different, and one thing I'd like to know too is how did you get into so the stuff that you are doing right now? It is fantasy and horror based, I guess I would say. So yeah, exactly. So prehistoric horror, cosmic horror is kind of what I'm doing right now. Yeah, like, how did you get into that? Well, that's a personal eccentricity. So that's something that I've just always been interested in. I've done a lot of I did a lot of writing. I've written scripts for comics and stuff too, and so and I kind of have a bit of a combative personality, so I think it just goes along with the territory sometimes, where you write essays, you have a wide range of criticism on things covering literature, film, even television, print media, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so your mind kind of goes down this thought process where you sort of, I'd hate to say it, but it's like you have a go to hell attitude about certain things after a while. And when you're in the industry, I will say that you do become a little bit more cynical about things. So it's like I joke around about it sometimes, and I say for the most part that that I basically like my chocolate and my humor dark. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Bittersweet is kind of like one of the most luscious, underrated words in the English language. So the cynic in me kind of likes the image of sorrow and delight entwined in an eternal tango. So if you look at Monsters and Madonnas, that's kind of what it's like. What's a cynic but kind of a bruised romantic sort of and I think most artists really, they're driven to the outlaw, the fringes of life, sometimes by rejection, because you work in a sanitary isolation a lot. You spend a lot of time with your wonky thought process trying to sort of but it also, sometimes it's hard luck, whatever it is, or your own damn disinclination to be a sheep, so you ruefully, like, you have humor that comes naturally. It's like you're a sad renegade soul. So you gravitate towards horror. You gravitate. I'm also a huge, like, I as a kid, I was a huge nerd when it came to evolution and so I've sort of hybrid those ideas with monster hybrids and humans and prehistoric beasts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So my stories have kind of gone in that direction, which is like creation myths about the creation of mankind, but in a fantastical way, a horrific sort of way.
Yeah.
Where I'm dealing with the image of sorrow and delight entwined in an eternal tango. So I say it's we're like a Darwinian nightmare run amok on this planet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what the tagline is for the stories and the scripts that I've gone in. Philosophically, I think cynics actually enjoy thinking about death and doom.
Okay.
and it's not in a bad way. It's sort of just a melancholy reflection, that the cosmos is kind of rigged against you. It's like you've managed to detach yourself from the rat race and its trivial urgencies, but now you're sort of in this wonky thought process of. So I don't know where it all comes from. Maybe from feeling alienated myself, and look, there's larger issues that are always going on when I see things that are ridiculous. The larger issues for me is just you see things that of life and death, of the consumer cultures of those stuff. I don't harbor any sort of gaudy delusions of immortality in that way. So I'm reasonably certain that in the stories that they're headed for the compost heap. You know what I mean? So, So it's So I used to do. I used to love H.P. Lovecraft and sort of that stuff. Because it was just the dark underside. And today the dark underside could be the food chain, cultural decline, suffering, insanity, houseflies, bad music, whatever it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I'm joking. I'm not too serious about it. But so that's where it comes from. I guess we you think it's philosophical in a way.
Yeah.
It's a philosoph. And if you think also, if you were to actually look at some of my work, you will notice that they've jokingly referred to me in the field as a master of light and shadow, because it's the strength of my work is light and shadow, which I think high contrast is what I was telling you about. Is the quality of an effective picture is having high contrast. It's almost like film noir, old school horror.
Okay.
I've sort of injected that into my work, because the thing about high contrast is, as I said, the eye's naturally guided that area, and it's dark, right? It's the darkest dark against the light, and it has a focus. In things that don't have a focus, all values within that will fall into a so the eye isn't attracted to any picture plane if you have too many values going on. That's not always a bad thing, but there should be a reason story-wise for not having a focus. Yeah. And I'm talking about visually right now.
Right.
But old school horror and stuff, if you ever go back and watch like film noir, black and white film and stuff, they always had a strong focus. There's no question about where the eye was to look. It's dramatic. It's high contrast. It makes a clear point. So the designer might, those focal points are never of equal value. They're never fighting for attention. You always know where you're supposed to be looking. That's actually a horror thing. That's actually in horror as well. And so when you go back and you think about like what commands your attention, why you look at things, what makes things pictorially like imperative, like what it is that sort of what is the nature of that impact. I think that the first business of us, this is sort of philosophical, so this might not be technique, so I might be getting a little, but why do you look at some pictures and why do you pass others over? I think that we, as animals and primitive, we give our quickest and completest attention to the things that stimulate danger.
Yeah.
And they sense danger. Okay. And so high contrast has danger. It's pow. So it's like the audience will stop to look at it because it has that sort of fear response.
Yeah.
And something might be strange or, so no matter what you've evolved, it's like we always have this fear arousing stimuli. Does that make sense? Or does it sound like
no. It's like the theory of the traffic slowing down during, something happening on the road or whatever. You stop to look. It's the entry. Yeah, I get that. And the composition that you're talking about too. I remember a similar concept back to like way before I didn't even understand it, but I kind of got what they were saying in it was in the Draw the Marvel Way book. There's actually a whole section about composition. And I remember looking at that going, oh, that's how they do it. And I'm like, I didn't know what they were talking about. I was like in 5th grade, but but I understood what they were saying. It made sense. I just looking at and they drew the shapes and like going, here is how this goes. And if we put the characters in here, your eye is drawn to this place. And it's like, but I didn't understand what that meant. I just saw like, oh, you're supposed to add shapes first and then fill in the characters. No, that wasn't it. But I mean, later on you figure it out. And then also taking classes and doing basically through doing, but one thing I'd like to know too, like, so you did these drawings and you decided to put them together in a book and then you started doing the comic circuit. So tell me about creating this book and like getting involved in, you've been like out traveling with the book and tabling and stuff like that. So tell me about some of the stuff that you've been doing there.
Yeah, so I managed to build a small following. I mean, you managed to build a small following. I don't really know how this works because I know that this is all. So I've been able to take out the guesswork in my art.
Okay.
Consistent. I have not been able to take out the guesswork when it comes to making things, obviously, something that popularity does not always correlate to quality or vice versa, right?
Okay, yeah.
How do you get things to work, or how are you able to get an audience, or how do you build an audience? And I really have never been able to take the guesswork out on that.
Right.
I've done numerous. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you what I have done is I've tried numerous different things, and I just put them out there. And if something responds and something works, then I might do. So I with Monsters and Madonnas, I had already years ago, I think well, not years ago, but around 2016, 2017, I had started putting original artwork, just posting it up on eBay.
Oh, really?
And
I like that. Nice.
And so just randomly I've been working professionally, but on the side, I was like, I wonder if because I noticed that a lot of people were buying original comic art. Mm-hmm. So they were buying the black and white, comic stuff. So I thought to myself, let me give it a shot. And I had somebody also that was a teacher in a way that not a teacher, it was a mentor that said that he had been doing it and said, why don't you give it a shot? And so I did. So I started putting original comic art, posting it starting it at $1.
Mm-hmm. Doing an auction?
See what it would do. On an auction, like for a week or two.
Yeah.
First couple of weeks I was pulling in, it would go to $30, then it would go to $40.
Yeah.
By a year and a half later, it was going to about $300-400 for one drawing. So I was doing a 9x12 ink, black and white, and I was pulling in a couple hundred, extra bucks a week.
Yeah.
What it was doing, though, on top of that, was it was getting me noticed among like people in Japan and people that are overseas, because there was a lot of people that are collectors and a lot of high spenders, people that just love artwork, and they were doing it. And so I got a bit of a following with that by doing more pinup stuff, kind of pinup work and stuff. Not when I say pinup could also be like splash pages, comic stuff, stuff.
Yeah.
Fantasy. To eBay, I don't do it anymore, so I had stopped about it. And there's a story behind that as well. But I had really like knocked it out of the park for a while there. Was doing quite well, and that is. But this is answering your question. That's what led me into getting a bit of a following, gave me the confidence to continue and then to start doing this other stuff where it's like I did a Kickstarter and the Kickstarter did okay, and then I put the book together. And so I was able to take content. Now, I also was not just an illustrator, though. I was a writer. So I wanted to take 8 anthology stories, my cosmic horror stories, and put them into the book as well, which I'm doing in volume 2.
Oh, cool.
And so all the original characters and stuff. But my main thing is that, because you're asking me specifically how I got into it, my thing was, I wasn't big on the internet, and I've been in the industry. People have been telling me years, you need to do this, you need to do that. I had done a lot of, so when I was on eBay, what I did do, though, is I also did some 100% original fan art. So I was doing some Batmans and Jokers and stuff like that, and that got me a lot of attention. Yeah. Because a lot of people weren't able to sort of do it in the style as well. Mm-hmm. It's like there's a difference between, there's a lot of crap on eBay. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's like, it's
I don't think anybody's disputing that. No.
Yeah. So it and that's actually could be beneficial to you though too, because if you have something that's of quality, it gives people a reason to choose you as opposed to the other options.
Right. Yeah.
So that might have helped me. You know what I mean? And I've been doing commissions for years, and I was trying to get away from commissions. I mean, there's a symbiotic relationship between artists and their clients, commission funded, which they think is as natural as the blue. But commissions, to be honest with you, for the most part, are just like they're roundly sort of, I'd hate to say it, but vigorously hated by those that have to accept them in order to put food on the table for the most part, because that principle is applied throughout history. It's like Goya did numerous like commissioned portraits of Spanish nobility in order to pay the bills, right? Mm-hmm. But the wonder of is that really he was dealing with a bunch of vain prigs who had too much time and too much money to spare. Because after he didn't have to paint the aristocracy anymore, he began to paint the most brilliant works of his life. There's a correlation there where you have that freedom, know. And I know that sounds terrible in a way, but for the most part, it's like after you've been doing commissions, if you've done them for years, you're going to find that you feel like you're manning the wheel, of a taxi cab while simultaneously absorbing endless commands from whichever moneyed backseat driver that sort of picked up on the street corner. Right. And it's like I don't, to tell a perfectly competent person in any field, I was going to say artist, but honestly in any field, we've all had this, what to create by essentially threatening with potential starvation if they don't comply. Right. Is sort of like degrading them. And artists, we're all a little wonky no matter what. It is part of, some of them get remembered for composing great symphonies, they that kind of stuff. But humility is called for, definitely. But but this is sort of,
But were the commissions the thing that got you off of eBay, or like you said that you stopped doing it? So because of this, or
what I started to do was, so I sold out. I went in because I needed to I couldn't handle it anymore. But by selling out, I mean is by getting a contract with a larger company. To do stuff. And so when you get a contract, you get a contract for 5 years, so you're not so worried about the commissions. But I still accept everything. So when I'm hitting the cons and stuff, I'm sketching right there for people. I've got my prints, my books, my originals. I bring everything with me. And you can earn, if you're hitting cons consistently, and eventually you get asked to do them too, and so you're not paying for the cons anymore.
Were you asked, or did you contact people? Like, how did that start out?
So in the beginning, no. In the beginning, I was paying. In the beginning, I wanted to hit the con. A lot of people were telling me, while you're doing this, why don't you hit the cons and stuff? And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't want to sit. But I gave it a shot, and I absolutely loved it. I pulled it. I made so much money on the first round that I was like, I've got to be an idiot not to do that. Right. So it's like it's like, because I'll be working to commission and stuff. So it just worked out for me, where it's worked out. And then you get asked, and you don't have to worry about it. So the main thing sometimes is the travel. But even that, if people like your setup and like how you are, and look, the bottom line with this business, and this is hard for people to get across, is that that good showmanship is the basis of everything at this point. And I'd hate to say it. Your work should speak for itself, number one. But the truth is that there's a great deal of showman in every artist who's worth their salt. You post lurid signs, you beat a gong, you yell himself hoarse, or you yell yourself hoarse. Anything to halt that passing crowd and lure them inside your tent. Yeah. And if you're a wise showman as well as an energetic one, and you have something worthwhile, that's key too, because there's a lot of people that are bullshitting and they are beating a gong and they're doing a little, and they're sort of shock or whatever. But if you're a wise showman as well, and you have something worthwhile, when you get them inside, get them inside your tent, I think you'll keep them there. So being an instinct, being by instinct a showman in general, it's like, I guess you naturally gravitate towards that eventually. You sort of stand there, you set up your tent, and you do your thing. And you're a sideshow barker, but you're a sideshow barker that's got some skill.
Yeah, and you learn over time. I mean, doing is how you learn. Like, even when you go out, you think you have it right away, and you see what's working, what's not, and you adjust, and you adapt. And how long have you been doing the comic circuit now?
Almost 5 years now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Almost 5 years. So yeah.
Is it seasonal? I never know if it's seasonal or if it goes on all year. Like, I know there are different kinds. It does go on all year. What else
I do as well? I also do vendors and markets and all that stuff as well. Okay. I will do just about anything at this point because it is fantastic all the way around. You build up. That's the other thing. You build up an email list too. I mean, if you want to get real technical now, if you build up an email list that you have, so that if you are going to do projects or you're going to do Kickstarters or something like that, you can let people know. I never advertise. What I do is I discuss philosophy. I might send out something on discussing about the pictorial imperative.
Okay.
So I talk about clarifying my formula for picture success. There might be people that follow me that are interested in technique. There might be people that are interested in philosophy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like what this podcast would be. So it's the same thing. Is that just try to improve your knowledge or get an idea of where other people are, how they're surviving as artists. But I'll tell you though, is showmanship is part of it.
Yeah.
Showmanship is part of it, and most artists are introverted. I was introverted, but there has to come a point where you have to get, you have to have thick skin,
right?
And you've got to get out there, and it's like you work in sanitary isolation, but in order to get some sort of recompensation for your labor, you got to descend to the plane of the marketplace and note and rejoice whatever the effects of your works are on people.
Yeah.
And so you want to have evidence of your work, right? Even if it's on a personally indifferent public.
Right.
I want these people I don't know to love my stuff.
Oh yeah. No, that's basically the concept. Yeah, for the most part.
So I mean, it's a endless feedback validation loop, which is not a good thing on the internet. I mean, it's not.
Right.
But in the sense, it's a matter of, for me, because I'm a little bit, I do have a bit of a bite to me. It's part of my thing, but it's a matter of less importance whether the public is pleased, amused, but I want to get some sort of reaction because that could lead to selling my stuff and promoting it. And it's more than ego at this point. It's survival for a lot of us. And why do artists paint pictures, write symphonies, carve statues, tell stories? Is it because they only find spiritual release in the doing of these things? I would say, but that's not the whole story. Or is it because they make a living after the fashion? There's got to be more to it that. And I think a lot of times, I mean, for me, from my perspective, there's one that's always disregarded. And I think that most of, anybody that's creating something is being an artist because they revel in the idea that they might affect or influence people with their work. Mm-hmm. If you have a story or something, you don't demand approbation, but you demand notice and response. And the thought that you might maybe through your work influence people straight past their defense mechanisms to their secret emotions might give you the satisfy something that's nestled in a hidden part of your mind. You know what I mean? It's part of that thing. So, and then obviously you got to earn money. Yeah. So
and enjoy yourself. That's another thing too. I mean, you wouldn't do it if you didn't enjoy it.
But the thing is, once you're doing it professionally and you're earning money, it's tricky. I will say that. It's a tricky balance.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're balancing why you initially what turned you on with you've got to make this, you've got this deadline, you've got to do this, and because you got to get paid for it. So listen, I'll point out that out of the 100 commissions or whatever it is, all the stuff I've ever done over the years, only 2 people, when it was for other people, said paint whatever you want or do whatever you want or create, you're the artist.
Yeah.
So it's a different, when you're really working professionally, it's a creative job. It's great, but it's still a job.
Yeah.
And it's not disillusionment, but I think that people have people just don't understand that, creative jobs are acting, writing, making music, films. They're seen by fans as some sort of utopian ideal.
Mm-hmm.
You're creating art. You're using your imagination. You're freed from the 9 to 5. But that's not always true.
Yeah.
You do have the freedom, and I love what I do. But but a creative job is a job still. That's why I said talent's overrated. Discipline is it, because while it's fun and entertaining, like any job, it can be very draining as well, especially if you're driven and stuff. If you work at a company, you're going to have executive meddling,
Oh, of course,
and stuff like that. And then if you're trying to get work for people, I tell younger people too that are getting into or just newbies, rejection letters, failed auditions. Those things are things that you have to work through, and you have to say this is what's going to happen. It's like when you put yourself out there, those things are going to happen. That's just part of it. So, it can make what seem like, oh, that was my dream job. That's a nightmare. And I say, no, it's not a nightmare.
Right.
You have to work through that now. You can't, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You did the book, and you mentioned before that you're actually working on the second book. Mm-hmm. So what's coming up? What is the second book going to be like? What's the concept behind that one?
So so when I was talking about the creation of mankind, creation myths and stuff, I'm fascinated by a term that is called uplift, developmental process that takes certain species of animals, and because now I'm going to get real nerd out on you, man.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
it's your book. You tell me.
Yeah. So without revealing too much, the idea of taking certain species of animals and transforming them into more intelligent by already intelligent. So you can do cultural, technological, evolutionary intervention. So remember, I told you I was interested in evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of that fictional or real process of uplifting and becoming an uplifted animal and stuff.
Okay.
I have something called the Uplift Universe, and it was a response that I had when I was talking to a buddy of mine about earlier science fiction, where I don't know if you ever see the Planet of the Apes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Planet of the Apes, where the concept was, should uplifted animals, because I don't think people ever got this out of those movies, but one of the main themes in there was, should uplifted animals be treated as possessions rather than people, in a way kind of like we are. Mm-hmm. We work a slave wage, we kind of slave it out, so we're kind of like uplifted animals if you think in those terms, if you think from a scientific perspective. But even if you think from a biblical, because we kind of taken these ideas and mixed and matched them, it's part of this sort of my stories are part of these differing policies of galactics and humans towards client races that they've uplifted.
Mm-hmm.
I know. So a bit much, but if you read, much more. So anyway, there's clients and there's patrons, and they extend rights, and so Monsters and Madonnas was based off of that concept. You remember? You ever read The Islands of Dr. Moreau?
I'm familiar with the story. I'm familiar with the movie, but I've never read it. No.
Okay, so the concept of uplifting could kind of be in the beginning of those stages where in that book, the novel, the scientist transforms animals into sort of horrifying parodies of humans through surgery and psychological torment and stuff. Because during that time period, I think Darwin had just Wells was obsessed with Darwin's theory of evolution, and so thought, well, geez, what would happen if we actually literally did something like that instead of letting time do it? You know what I mean? Where it was kind of like,
yeah.
So it resulted in this sort of like Victorian concerns about vivisection and the power of unrestrained scientific experimentation that could do terrible harm. And and I read that stuff as a kid, and it really just like I was fascinated by the idea of it, and then the connection to us being uplifted apes and stuff like that. So that extensive brain surgery. There's many other stories that sort of struck on it, but there hasn't been a lot about it.
Yeah.
And when I look at us, I look at this whole thing, I do see a sort of Darwinian nightmare run amok with these little us as technological monkeys and our tools and all the stuff.
Okay.
So it's an obvious story that I'm surprised that a lot of people aren't writing about or fiction, what ifs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it
okay.
is. And look, everything that's going on right now from the look, there's not any petting or whispering to the animals but we do have a new kind of training for modern times, and that thing is it's this endless algorithmic feedback loop that people are tapping into, which is likes and comments and follows. That's kind of another way of manipulating lab animals here. You know what I mean? So what we used to be called advertising now can be understood as continuous behavior modification on a titanic scale.
Right.
So for me, I mean, that's that's messing with these lab animals, but yeah.
Okay. And when do you expect this book to be coming out? Like, do you have a release date, or like how far along are you on it?
Well, yeah. So the book is finished.
Okay.
I was going to have it done before the pandemic.
Okay.
And then the pandemic happened, and I kind of was, put it on the back burner. And then I started hitting all the cons again about 3 or 4 months ago. I had gotten vaccinated, and I did all, so I know we don't want to get into too much of that stuff. But I felt comfortable for myself. I wanted to get vaccinated and, and that kind of thing before I started going out and hitting the cons, and stuff. Okay. And stuff. And so once I got comfortable with that, then I started hitting stuff. And now I'm, volume 1 has been selling like I can't keep enough of them, which is good. So when I go, I'm selling them all. But I want to have volume 2 because volume 2 has a lot of the other content in it, and it's going to be a larger format. It's going to have concept art, the storyboards. It's going to have the comic stuff, and it's going to have the actual scripts and stories in there.
Oh, cool. And so you're going to have that with you.
Oh, so I'll probably, I'm looking to do a Kickstarter now coming up. I haven't decided when. I was going to try to have it ready for this con because it's always good to have if you're going to do a Kickstarter when you hit the cons, it's great to have people right there because you can get them sometimes to pledge for the Kickstarter right away. But I didn't have it timed enough. I've been doing so much. So I had done another con, like I said last week. I had just gotten back from the other con because I went to the Savannah one. And, so my plan to have it out is within the next month. I want to do a Kickstarter within a month time right now for that. The Kickstarter is mainly because I don't know what, if people are interested, but when you do Kickstarter, if you're doing it for books and stuff, the publishing, because it's quite expensive to get the books published, and you have to create quite a bit of stock, right? So, but the content itself, I always have done ahead of time. I always have all my content done before I've done anything. I notice there's a lot of Kickstarters where people are working on the content while the Kickstarter's going, that would make me paranoid.
Right.
I want to know before I'm getting people's money that the project is done. That way I can get it out the door.
Right.
Once it's done.
And if people did want to follow what you were doing or find out more about the book, or even just get the book if they can't make the comic circuit, where should they go to find out more about you?
Yeah, thanks. So my website is monstersandmadonnas.com.
Okay.
And then I only have one social media. I'm not on Facebook really at all. I don't even really. I just kind of have a dummy, dummy account that's just sitting there.
Yeah.
But I am on Instagram. It's Conidis Art. So my last name, which is CONIDIS, and then art. But monstersandmadonnas.com is really where you can get in contact with me. I try to get people to subscribe. Go to my site, subscribe. As everybody, please subscribe, guys.
Right.
But in that case, I don't really send out anything except what I said earlier, which is I usually just send out stuff related to the field. Stuff I've written. I send essays. I started to knock out some video essays and stuff like that. And because I teach, I have an art academy too, by the way, that's online. And I teach classical figure drawing and stuff for people that are interested. You can sign up with me, and you get a one-on-one correspondence with me. So those are the things that I push. I push my books. I push prints. I push originals, and then I push if people are interested in learning draftmanship, improving on the tradition of fine draftmanship. So
nice. Well, I want to thank you for talking with me today. I'm glad we finally got a chance to hook up.
Yes, man. Perfect. Thank you.